Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Zany Mystic, also known as Lance White. Tonight's guest is Egan Sanders. Egan is the author of a book that I highly recommend called The Magic Box. He is also an intuitive counselor, coach, spiritual development teacher, author, and event organizer. He was born with intuitive abilities and as an empath has always been able to psychically experience the thoughts, images, and feelings of other people. As a small child, he would talk in great detail about his previous life as a shaman in the American Southwest. So let's find out more about this lifetime by welcoming him to the show now. Hi, Egan. How are you?
Hi, Lance. Very good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I just read your book, and I absolutely loved it. It was just every wonderful bit of wisdom and magic was packed right into it. I really enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you. I worked on it for about 12 years on and off, and it was a strange process that I went through in writing the book. But when I got down to the final edit of it, my goal really was to write something that was short, that was inspirational, but also had practical tools for reality creation and gave some good points. So I'm very happy with it, so thank you.
Yes. In fact, to be honest with you, the ending kind of brought tears to my eyes. So
that's the thing. I know when I was writing it when I first started writing it in 1996, basically what happened was I was on hiatus from my job, and I'd been reading a lot of motivational things, and I'd always been into metaphysics. And I kind of sat down and spontaneously just started to write the book. And I knew when I came to the end, and I don't want to give away the end of the book.
Right. Don't
it's a surprise. That's what they always say. Wow, that ending. How did you come up with that? I just kind of made it up, but it just was very poignant. So I think I'm very proud of that too.
I'd say that's divine inspiration. that's my label for it anyway.
Oh yeah. I always feel like I remember reading about Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Richard Bach, his little book, which is it's similar in certain ways, and he just said, that he channeled it, and that's kind of the way I felt with this. Is that yes, I can see certain ideas that I put into it, but it's just like creativity. Certain things just come out very clear.
Yeah. And
that came out very clear. So I think it was divinely inspired.
Well, I agree with you on that aspect of channeling. I read a lot of channeled material and as a result, I've gotten to be a little more discerning in what I accept as, mainly accurate information. And I know that for myself, in my own writing, I end up channeling stuff frequently. I just start typing, and then all of a sudden it's like the energy shifts, and I've learned that you have to get out of the way and just let that flow. And then when it's over, it's over. You can't really force it to go on longer than it does.
Yeah, I mean, when you're writing or doing anything, I think that there's certain things ring true.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing The Magic Box, I tried to just keep the stuff that I felt like really felt strong, like I felt strong. But I know in the channel material, I've been reading channel material for many, many years, all of it's good. There are many different levels of awareness. I think there's many, good ways for channel material, but sometimes I'll read it and I'll say, well, it just feels like a rehash of what somebody's saying, or or some higher being is calling me their child. That doesn't, dear child, it doesn't feel very empowering. So
thank you. You're the first person who has said that, and I couldn't agree with you more. As soon as I see all of this, talking down, I just feel like what we're talking to is somebody's ego.
Well, it's a hierarchical structure. To me, I've gone through an interesting process because I've been teaching since 1995, and I was a student, before then for many, many years. And when I finally got to the point of beginning to teach, it was a sharing, it was a learning, and there were many more lessons for me to learn as well. And so what I find when I'm teaching something, I call it more sharing. Like I come in, I present the ideas. I don't present it as the gospel, but I say, well, this has been my experience, and then I learn from that. But there's a total equality. I believe in validating other people's realities. So to me, I don't want to invalidate something. Like even though if a channel calls me their child or something, I mean that maybe their structure, but I try to keep it where I feel like it's an empowering vibration. That's why when I was working with the Magic Box, I wanted to make it sort of like have archetypes in it, have an inspirational story, but then actual practical, like a how-to guide in it, so that it would empower people, but in a profound way, but not where I'm claiming to give every little answer to everything.
Yes, I like the way that you did that, and that's kind of what drew me into it. And I hope I'm not giving too much away by saying that there is a wizard in it.
Yeah, there's there's basically.
And I love wizards.
It's like a wizard. It's like a teacher. I mean, he's the prototypical teacher, and then there's like a student who grows up and over time develops. So basically, it's about the spiritual path, and the brief idea of the magic box is that this boy goes to a wizard when he's a very little boy and says, he wants to manifest things, and so the wizard has a magic box, and whenever you put a wish in the box, it comes true. So as the boy gets older, he keeps on going back and asking for more things, which, as human beings, we tend to ask for more and more things. So by the end, though, after getting health and wealth and love and all these things, he asks for wisdom or enlightenment. So to me, that's really the key thing, is you can have stuff, but you also need to have wisdom and enlightenment.
Yes, absolutely. And that seems to be something that this culture, and in fact most of the planet, seems to be dearly lacking in, due to the obsession with materialism and the acquisition of stuff.
Well, I think we're going through a questioning period about that. It's kind of like paradoxical. On the one hand, we focus on lack all the time, with the economy and all the things that are going on, and people are suffering around the world. It's not a made-up thing.
Right.
I was talking to a metaphysical teacher the other day, and they're like, well, my economy is fine, and I'm okay. And I'm like, well, I understand that, and I'm happy that you're doing well, but that doesn't, it was a little bit elitist that I felt like saying, what about the balance? You can still be doing well, but have compassion for other people.
Exactly. Right.
So I think we're learning lessons. I mean, to me, I was thinking about this today. I was just, before our interview, I was watching a documentary about John Lennon, and he did this thing back in 1970 where it was like a love-in for peace. And for like a whole year, he was doing these events and on TV promoting peace. And I thought, and basically, so there was lots of war, and he was saying, peace, let's have peace. So I was thinking, with the thing with the bailout and the economy, I think the real message that I would like to share with other people, whether it's with my books or, even what I'm doing, my classes, is that there is abundance. There is plenty. I mean, there is plenty of energy. We can help each other, but we have to examine how we distribute those things. We have to examine, for me, real simple fix is that, if you have money, help another person.
Right.
I mean, it's very simple.
Right. And it seems that there has to be some kind of line drawn as to what constitutes, a healthy budget. For some people that are multimillionaires, they feel poor. They literally feel impoverished in comparison with their billionaire friends who, have private jets and so on and so forth. So it's all relative, but I really like the idea of sharing, and of course, some people would say, well, that's bordering on, what is that word that they use?
Socialism, that was the whole,
But I think it comes down to helping others and seeing the other as oneself.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing that point up, because we're all interconnected. So to me, I don't think you have to take from somebody else to give to yourself. But I think the idea is that I think as a planet we're going through a lesson about what is prosperity and what is abundance, because even with a lot of the New Age people, when I'm doing my workshops, I do a workshop called Opening to Receive. I realize that, it's very fashionable now with The Secret and a lot of these other things to say, oh, we can all be millionaires and you just have to do a treasure map or you just pray for it, and not that, I mean, that can happen.
Yeah.
But what I found is that, if people don't have a foundational consciousness where they feel they deserve, where they can value things, where they feel good about themselves, they will not let themselves have money or abundance no matter how much is around them.
Absolutely. And then that takes you into the whole area of self-sabotage and self-deception and the shadow self and so on and so forth.
Well, it comes down to, I didn't get into it in the magic box because, it was the same thing, but actually I talk about deservability, which in the magic box is going to be a sequel which will be a follow-up. You know, there's another character at the very end of the magic box. It's a little girl who's introduced.
Yeah.
And the next story is going to be about her.
Oh, good.
And it's going to be and her journey, and it will be about deservability. And what basically deservability is you know, how we rationalize allowing ourselves to have things. So again, I know in my own life, you know, I would be doing affirmations and prayers and things and looking at my beliefs, but at one point I came across a teaching which talked about there are basically two big blockages, if you want to call them that, to creating what you want in your life. One of them is feeling that you have the power to create your reality. You know, not just, you know, maybe waiting for a deity to give you things, but thinking that, you know, I really do create my reality, I really can manifest it. So that's one thing, you know, building up your power. And the other thing is deservability. And the example that I was given was that, you know, people rationalize if they deserve, like, you know, if you're physically attractive, you deserve a good mate. If you make a certain amount of money, you deserve certain things. If you've suffered enough, this is another thing when people suffer after a while.
That's right.
They feel like, okay, I've suffered, now I deserve.
Right.
So the example that I was given was of a little baby where, you know, when a baby's born, for the first year, you know, it eats, it sleeps, it poops. It really doesn't. It's not really doing much. I mean, it may be cute or not cute. You know, some kids, you know, they're not always cute, but you love them anyway. And they go. I have 9 nephews and nieces, so I know this. But after the year, they get a birthday party, and we love them. They don't really do anything, but we love them. And I think that's the way God really, or the higher power, whatever you want to call it, sees us. It wants to give us good things, but we resist them. And we're working through that, I think, as a planetary system. Yeah,
I have to agree with you on that one. Let's go back a little bit into some of your early recollections in this lifetime. You mentioned, I'd like to find out more about the empathy and spiritual aspects of your childhood, because you'd had some interesting experiences, didn't you?
Yeah, the two things that stick out in my mind, I was always very empathic. I was feeling the feelings of other people. And I remember, I think I was like 9 years old. We were out at a restaurant. It was me, my brother, and my mother. And my brother, who was several years older than me, and my mother were getting in an argument about something. There was a lot of contention there. And, you know, I was like a little kid. I was, I don't know, again, like 9 or something. I really wasn't paying attention. I was eating my food or whatever. And I kind of was like zoning out. I wasn't even paying attention. And all of a sudden I started to cry. And like I really started to bawl crying, and both of them looked at me and they're like, you know, what's the matter? Are you okay? And then it was like, I felt, you know, what it was is I almost felt like I was feeling the pain of both of them and sort of like releasing it. And then like 3 seconds later, like I was okay. It was like no big deal, and I went back to eating, and that was it. And it was a very strange, I mean, I had a lot of experiences like that. Another thing was when I was like 4 years old, we were in Florida to see my grandparents, and we were coming home from something in an evening, and I was sitting in the back car with my grandmother, and we were just talking, and all of a sudden my voice changed. And I started talking in this deep voice, and I started talking about my life, where I was the son of the chief underground. They called me Little Underground. I started going to this whole elaborate story of how I was the chief's son, and then I was the chief, and I went into this whole detailed thing about our tribe and in America, you know, and before the Europeans came and all that.
Wow.
And then I said, and then I finally finished. I said, and that's it. And then I went back to talking like a little kid, you know. And they're like looking at me, going, "This kid is weird."
Wow.
So I was always talking about past, not always, but I mean, I had a lot of those experiences. And then when I was like 19 and I was in college, I started taking some classes on religions of India and some other things, and I really got into metaphysics. But all through my life, I was always having like weird psychic experiences. I was just strange, the things I would say and do, you know.
As an empath, how can we learn to recognize our own abilities? I'm with you on the empathic part, because I felt everything when I was a little kid. I mean, I had to walk on eggshells around my parents, and I still do. Sometimes I have difficulty, you know, deciding what's my stuff and what's coming from outside. But I think a lot of people are empathic. How do we recognize those abilities?
A couple of things. This is a very important topic that you brought up, because as we approach to 2012, a lot of people are simply having more psychic recognition and synchronicity and feeling on a deeper level.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to even though my book, The Magic Box, is brand new, I do want to recommend one of my favorite books about intuitive development. It's called Personal Power Through Awareness.
Okay.
It's a channel book by Sanaya, Sanaya Roman. She channels a guy named Oren, and it is the little textbook that I use.
Okay, Personal Power Through Awareness?
Personal Power Through Awareness. The subtitle is A Guidebook for Sensitive People.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's it's one of, Oren is, I consider one of my guides, but there's a couple of things with the intuition. Now, back in the day when I first started, like, consciously studying it, like I wanted to be psychic and I wanted, to have powers to see the future, and, I can do a little bit of that. But what I want people to understand is that your intuition or psychic ability is a gift and a responsibility, and it develops in relation to how willing you are to use it for a higher good, or what we call healing contacts. So, for example, when somebody comes to me, I get a lot of women who come to me for counseling. They're like, well, I had a bad relationship, or that, they're in some contention with a male or something. First I say, well, I can tell you what I'm picking up from this person, but are you willing to love them unconditionally? Are you willing to learn from your experiences? Are you willing to have a healing contact? So, in my own experience, the more healing and counseling work and inspirational work I wanted to do, my abilities would develop exponentially. But basically, it's all just, even though I was born with a lot of ability, you have to practice, you have to listen to your inner voice, you've got to, take action on your insights. I've seen people who are very psychically open, but they wouldn't listen to the insights, so, they just would kind of flounder.
What are some of the red flags or signs that our empathic feelings are something other than our own imagination or, say, our contrived thoughts? In other words,
it's an excellent question. Basically, people perceive psychic phenomena through three channels. Either they feel it, they're called feelers.
Okay.
They see things, like those visionary or visual, they'll get like images.
Okay.
Or they'll be, they'll know stuff. They'll get an idea in their mind and that's it.
Okay.
So you get to know kind of when you get a psychic hit. Now, there are other kind of interferences because you might have a fear about something. And that might pop up in your mind. You might think, well, that's a psychic message. That can happen. Sometimes another tricky thing that I found is that as my intuitive abilities grew, sometimes what people were telling me and what they were actually feeling were completely different. I was at an environmental event several months back, and the organizer was very stressed out. And I was trying to set something up, and I asked for something, and she responded to me like in a very plain voice, but I felt a tremendous amount of hatred and anger at me. And so it's confusing because it's like, what's me? What's them? What am I really feeling? And so what I would recommend for people to understand, too, is about transparency, which is knowing what your energy is, knowing what other people's energy is, but allowing yourself to be around all different types of energies and allow the negativity to flow through you.
Ah, good.
So the thing is, as you expand your consciousness, and we're all expanding our consciousness, you are more aware of the positive and the negative, but you need not take on the negative. So, like when I'm watching TV, and this is my gut instinct, and I know I'm right on about this.
Okay.
On the TV, they're all running these stories about, the economy and people are losing their jobs, and it's all, we're all going to hell in a handbasket. And I'm watching it, I'm going, yes, people are losing their jobs. We're not at 30% unemployment. We're not at 20% unemployment.
Right.
We're not even at 10% unemployment.
Right.
And instinctively, what my gut instinct says, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
We're going through some changes.
Yep.
It's hyperbole. It's exaggeration in terms of the media because they tend to focus on the most negative thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not to worry. So I trust that everything will actually be okay. So I can discern that. Now, if I was not that aware, I would look at the outer world and think that that's absolute. But I don't have to buy into that because I can trust my intuition. See, the final thing I'll say about it is that we have to learn to become inner-directed. If you look at the outer world, nothing, and I challenge anybody who's listening, and I debate anybody about this, nothing makes sense. It is total chaos. There is no consensus reality anymore. We're being forced to trust our own, to navigate with it within ourselves, and let that direct us.
Absolutely. Wow, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, Terence McKenna spoke about, he tied together the I Ching and his theory about time wave zero, that the further, how does that work? The closer we get to 2012, he used 2012 as an end date, the greater the increase in novelty, or chaos, basically. And then the more, and he gives examples about that, and it does appear that everything seems to, at least on the surface, seems to be splintering off into different timelines.
Yeah, we have. It's you know what it is. It's resonant structures. It's like if you have a guitar and you pluck a string, the next one will begin to vibrate with it.
That's right.
But basically, what the Maya were talking about with 2012 when they said it was a cataclysm and the end of the world, it didn't mean the end of the world. It meant the end of a reality structure. So what's happening is, a couple of things. The people who have not dealt with their belief systems are not coming from a place of love. They're going nuts. They're going crazy. The people are still into control and manipulation and all that. That's an old paradigm. That's falling away. So those people will kind of be in their own reality bubble, as I like to call it. And then other people who are saying, we're all integrated. We have to be kind to each other and love one another. That's a different consciousness. So there is a splitting of the worlds or realities.
Yeah.
Also, other aspects of 2012 are timelessness, where time has less relevance. Like I'm not really good with clocks or time.
Yeah.
I just go by my gut instinct.
Yeah.
And increased psychic awareness, where people, and you can see it. First, it was the internet.
Yeah.
Then it was these Bluetooth, where the people have these little things in their ears.
Yeah.
But people are getting more psychically connected. So cell phones are really a precursor to a telepathic society.
Yes. I like that. That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And then that also, those who are moving in that direction, which would be, I guess, all of us that are capable of tuning into that frequency, would be more aware of what each other is actually thinking and feeling and so on, like you said about the woman that had hatred. So that would preclude politicians from lying and being corrupt.
Well, here's
or
something.
Maybe there wouldn't even be politicians.
Well, here's something very interesting, and I know you know this, but I'm going to share with the other listeners.
Please do.
I was watching a documentary because I like history, and I was watching about the 70s.
Yeah.
And one of the characters in the 70s was Anita Bryant. So Anita Bryant was an activist. We had this whole thing with the gay rights recently, which really it's so absurd that they just don't let people marry each other. But She was an activist.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they talked about her whole story. She'd been a singer, and then she became an activist, and she was a spokesperson for the big orange juice people and, all these things. Anyway, she was so strident. I mean, she was supposed to be a Christian, but she was so anti-gay and filled with hate that after there was, like, all this drama, she got a pie in her face, too, but I don't want to get too specific.
That's okay. You can do it.
After her whole debacle, what happened was she lost her promotional contract with the orange juice. She had a lot of financial problems. She went to bankruptcy twice.
Yeah.
I mean, she had all these problems, and it was very interesting how instead of promoting love and peace, she promoted hate, and the universe kind of, got back at her.
Yeah.
And another very interesting character was, his name escapes me at the current moment, but it'll come back to me. There was a guy who was the campaign manager for George W. Bush in 2000. You know what happened there. And this guy was a terrible human being. I mean, he was a young guy, I think in his 30s. I can't think of his name right now. But he basically would lie. Actually, no, it wasn't for George W. Bush. It was his father. But he would take the truth and kind of create all this controversy and do all these things. And basically, what happened to him is that many years later he got a huge brain tumor because he had done like some really bad stuff, and then he found God, and then he died. But the point is that
the end.
what I found is fascinating is that at this time in life, Lee Atwater, that's who it was. Lee Atwater, that was the name of the political operative, the Republican political operative. What I'm finding is that as we move towards 2012, what we put out comes back much more quickly to us. So when I wrote The Magic Box, I wrote the inspirational story and then the process about how to create a preferred reality, because people now don't have a lot of time to process a lot of information.
Yeah.
They basically need inspiration, then know they can do it, and then simple techniques to manifest what they want, because everything is very speeded up.
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's as if, I went through the 60s when they were doing the LSD and the rest of it, and then in the 70s and 80s we did AST and the Advocate Experience and so on. And then there's personal therapy and regression therapy, and I mean, we've had time to do all that, but there isn't time to do that anymore.
Well, no, we're definitely out of time, and interesting you mentioned again the 60s is that my last life ended in 1948, and I was in the astral plane for many years. I was like, I want to be there. I want to be during the Flower Children. I want to be one of those guys. And I was born in '67, so I did come out, but I was too young to do anything. But in retrospect, I realized that a lot of my friends are boomers, and when I look at that period, again, it was a chaotic period of experimentation. And it's interesting that, I never was into the drug scene. I mean, it's not something that interested me because I always found that it threw off my psychic ability, even if I drank beer.
Yeah.
So it always scared me to drink or to do anything really stronger than that. But, everything has their timing and their lessons. And, I just feel like with that generation, they did so many amazing things. I mean, the flower power, all those things with Vietnam and peace. I mean, it's just, the vibrations then were so much denser than they are now. I mean, I'm like blessed,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So thank you guys. Thanks.
Well, I just had a really wonderful astrologer on the show, Jessica Murray, and she points out, as other astrologers do, that according to the stars, we're entering into a period of time when the 60s will complete itself. In other words, they say that the planets are aligning in such a way that we're going to have a revisit of the 60s, but it will pick up somewhere. It'll be the energy of the completion of the 60s as opposed to the seeds that were started in the 60s. So if that's the case, that would be a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that because it's interesting that there's always a positive aspect. I mean, one of the greatest lessons I learned was that when you have a negative situation, it's not really a problem. It can be of service to you. So, for example, with the environmental stuff, one of the things it's forcing people to do is to realize, hey, we're connected. I mean, if somebody pollutes somewhere in the world, it's going to affect other parts. Same thing with the global problems, the financial problems. Like if we're not buying goods, China's hurt, and then other countries are hurt. So that is forcing people to say, whether they're metaphysical or realize, that how we're all interconnected, saying, wait, we really are interconnected. We better, approach this in a different way because what we do to somebody else really does affect us, even if it's just indirectly.
Yes, yeah.
So there's a lesson there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that comes to mind is that there's been quite a long period of control exerted over the planet. And I don't know how big you are on some of the conspiracy theories that are out there.
Oh, no, thank you for mentioning that. I saw that on your blog.
Yeah.
I got blown away a few months ago where I was, I have cable access, and there's a couple of shows, Democracy Now! And, there's a couple of, there's a documentary channel of Free Speech TV, and I was just, one night I turned it on, it was a documentary about 9/11. And, I actually many years ago worked on Wall Street. I worked in the World Trade Center. This was back in the 80s.
Goodness.
I was there in 87 when it was Black Monday. I got laid off then. I know those guys are going through, but I turned it on, I was watching, and I was like, all right, and I think it was called 9/11 Mysteries.
Yeah.
And they started talking about how, that the buildings collapsed, not because of the planes, but that there were explosions. And I'm like, what? So I started watching this thing, and basically what they said was that the World Trade Centers had been sold about 6 months before 9/11 to a wealthy investor.
Yeah.
Larry, I think it's Silverberg, I forget his name.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know if people know this, listeners know this, but back in the 60s, that was all like a depressed area. I mean, they wanted to renovate it. So the whole idea with the World Trade Center was they knocked everything down, they built the World Trade Centers, and that revivified the whole area. Like they had the subway station there. I mean, it was that whole mall. I don't know if people know, there was a whole mall underneath the World Trade Center. And it totally revivified and regenerated that whole area. Well, what happened was back by 2000 or in the late 90s, they were losing money because the World Trade Centers, first of all, were built with asbestos. And they were going to have to spend about $1 billion to remove all the asbestos, which was a flame retardant. They were losing money on the deal. And so there was all this. So you begin to collect these facts. I'm like, oh, it's interesting. Then they showed how strong the buildings are. They were so reinforced with metal that there is no way that they should have collapsed. But then they started showing the videos of explosions. The bottom line is, and I'm not here to try to convince people because I don't want to do that, but basically it blew my mind, and I was like, wow. I was like, it was fascinating. So I think we're learning things, and there was a great book called The Shock Doctrine by Heidi, I can't think of her name right now. It's a book called The Shock Doctrine, which talks about when there's a big shock, it distracts people. So because of the 9/11 thing, then Bush came in, they could do they could do more control over the society, but you know what? It didn't work. It backfired. So because there's not a terrorist under every rock.
That's right. And you know, there seems to be some of that energy lingering on that the powers that be, you know, the elite who control the world or think they control the world are probably beginning to lose some of their control. They still have most of the assets, but you can't steal somebody's spirit. And I think we're opening up to a higher consciousness.
I think it's happening. I know when I volunteered on the Obama campaign, I was out there canvassing and doing all these things. And I do activism with a couple of different things, and
cool.
It was interesting just talking to people and interacting, and it's really influenced me quite a bit. One of the things I'm working on right now is I'm into hypermiling, and hypermiling, for the people who don't know, is when you basically use techniques to use less gas. So I basically get 50% more gas mileage. I get about 35 miles per gallon on my car, which you only get about 23 because there's certain techniques I do. So what I've been doing is I've been passing around an emailing to people. I've also printed up a copied version of it where when I go out, I put on people's windshields.
Oh, good.
Actually, the other day I got chased by a security guard because I went to an insurance company near where I live, and I went in the parking garage, and there was no signs. And I was just going through. I put about 50 on the parking things, and then I saw the security guard running towards me. So I started to run because I was like, I don't want to be arrested. And then I injured my leg. I'm a little bit limp today because I pulled a muscle or something.
Oh, no. See, you should have intuited that event coming.
but you know what happened was, it's funny though, Lance, is that it was funny because what happened, this is a very strange thing. I was in the underground parking lot. I was putting the things in there. So so I was almost done. Then there was a car accident right on the road, like about 50 feet from me. So I pulled out to see what it was, and then something said, look behind you. I looked behind me, and I could see a security guard running. So I didn't know if he was for me or the accident, but I didn't want to stick around and find out, so I got out of there. But the point is, if you take an action, now my goal is to reach 100,000 people with that email for the hypermiling techniques, because it can work on any car.
Well, I want to get that from you.
I'm going to email it to you. I got you. I'll email it to you. But the point is, if everybody takes one action, it can have a big impact. So when I think about the Illuminati or people controlling things, there's definitely weird stuff going on. But there are more small people than big people. And as we raise the awareness, that's why with the magic box, I feel like when I get this into people's hands, it tells them that they have power. It tells them that they can focus their mind. I mean, you have to raise their consciousness. But then again, paradoxically, some people don't want to be awakened. Some people want to be victims. So that's the big push and pull. Is there are a bunch of people who say, we want to be empowered, and there's a bunch of other people who say, no, we're weak, we're powerless, our belief system is that we don't have any power, we want to blame other people.
I think you're absolutely right again, and I foresee a time when that will end up being the splitting of the ways, kind of what the Hopis say is the great Y in the road. You know, one road leads one direction, one road leads another, and I think that has something to do with our soul choices prior to coming in at this time.
Very good point. I mean, I know that we make agreements. We can call them soul agreements or soul choices or, whatever,
I hate the word contract because it sounds so corporate, but...
It's called soul, So, and that's a very good point about reality creation. I want to bring this point up before I forget, is that to all the people who are listening, if sometimes you want to manifest something, whether it's a soulmate or money or something, and it doesn't happen in the timing that you want or it doesn't happen at all, be aware that you might have contracts. You might have made agreements not to do those things. I know for myself, spiritual growth was always the most important thing. Now, I always had money. I always had what I needed when I needed to have it. I didn't, suffer too much, although there was some lean years. But my whole focus was to evolve myself as fast as I could, as much as I could. So that was the focus of my life. So if I needed something for a workshop or a meditation or a book, I had it. Relationships, I wasn't always that great at, but, I managed to get a couple of them.
Yeah.
Money, it wasn't that big of an important thing to me, but I actually did pretty well in that area, too.
Yeah.
But then as I expanded my awareness, because a lot of reality creation is expanding your awareness, to me, it's like reality creation and mindfulness. If you combine those together, you have the awareness, and then you have the power to affect your reality. And one of those aspects was realizing I had made certain agreements that had prevented me from certain things.
That's a really good point. Because people sometimes wonder, myself included, why certain things are happening. I've learned to give the universe, turn things over. In other words, once you create something, you turn it over and let the universe present it in the way that it wants to. And so you have to give up your preconceived notions about how it's going to arrive. But I'm also finding that it's an interesting, intuitive process of being taken through the hoops and then finding out that certain things weren't meant to be, and then an instant later, something really wonderful comes through. And that's happened to me today. And it was like all these paths were blocked, but I had to go through that to get to the point where the gift arrived.
Well, I talk about that in the Magic Box. It's called The Highest Good, because the main character in the book, he gets a lot of things, but it's not always a straight road. I mean, he suffers a little bit. There's time that goes by.
Yes,
and, so what I have found is that this is typical, and again, here's another secret. And I'm not mentioning the book The Secret, but an actual real workable secret.
This is your secret.
When you want to manifest something in your life, that's something you haven't had before, and you begin to say, that's my goal, what tends to happen is you have to go through a re-education process, an integration process to allow yourself to now change your consciousness. So a lot of times you might get the opposite. Like you want a soulmate, and all of a sudden you can't find anybody to date, or maybe you have to learn about self-love, or you have to look about, you have to go through a training process. And so I realized that for myself, many years ago I read The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts, and I thought, well, this can work for me. I'll just change my beliefs, and my reality will change. So I started eating hamburgers and French fries for every day for lunch, and my diet was bad, and I started getting fat. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not working. I should be perfect health, but I'm getting fat. And so I had to learn to develop the belief systems to have what I wanted. And so really there's a deep level. So a lot of times when there's chaos or emotional turmoil, it's a flushing out of those beliefs. And that's what I think we're seeing individually and collectively, because on a collective level, it's like we've been on this drunken frenzy, and it's like we go out and you get all liquored up, and then the next day, like you're throwing up, or you don't feel so good, and it's like we're belching up the last of the old paradigm kind of stuff on a global level and individually, and having to re-examine. So even with the money thing, I wish everybody was abundant, but you know what? I think more people would, if their needs were met and they had more love in their life, more connection with other people, community, we would have a happier world.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You're leaving me speechless.
Well, I'm good. I know my stuff. I've given a lot of talks to a lot of different groups, and I tried to, with the Magic Box, to synthesize down a lot of the ideas. Now, some people have said, well, the Magic Box is a kid's book, and I say, well, kids have read it, they liked it, but it works on many levels, because I put a lot of layers. I spent a lot of time. Great story is that I met Dan Millman, who's the author of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Extremely nice guy. I don't know if you ever had him on the show, but he is fantastic. And I was telling him I was writing a book, and he said, well, why don't you use my editor, whose name is Nancy Carlton. And so it ended up that she had done some of his books and some other famous books, and she was fantastic. I mean, she took my book and made it, improved upon it. And so it's a short book. It doesn't take long to read, maybe 45 minutes an hour, but it has lots of layers. You can go back to it and you'll see different things. So that's the way I wrote it, is that it will reach a lot of different levels of consciousness.
Yeah, that was what I felt too. And, it can be taken on many different levels. And the good thing too about it is that once you take something like that in, even if it doesn't seem to hit you at those deeper levels, it's in there. It is then in your consciousness, and it works. It's like a seed that's planted, and I believe that our soul or spirit works on this stuff 24 hours a day, whether we're sleeping or awake or whatever, And it's constantly refining and tuning and taking in information and making adjustments to this life, that life, and so on and so forth. So it just has a wonderful depth and feel to it that you just have to experience for yourself.
I think you said the right word is depth. Part of my issue with The Secret movie and a lot of these things that are coming out is they're very superficial, I find. It's not, and the thing is, metaphysically, it's true. If you focus on something, it will expand and so forth and so on, but the purpose of my life isn't just to get convenient parking spots and to find a soulmate and to have lots of money. It's about mastery of our emotions, our thoughts, and I have to tell you, I've got to be honest with you too, Lance, is that the more I try to reach enlightenment and expand my awareness, I would face my own darkness.
Absolutely.
And I went through a lot of dark years. It was kind of interesting with the Magic Box. I started in '96, worked on it for a couple of years, tried to send it out. Nobody really wanted to do it, so took a break. In 2000, had a major change in my life, and I was teaching and doing a bunch of other things. Then I went through a very dark period back in 2004, where I went through a lot of the dark night of the soul and the shadow, and just all sorts of terrible things were happening.
Oh, yeah.
And then in 2006, finally, people wanted to actually publish the book, and I was like, well, I don't know if it's the right time. And then I went through some other layers of growth, and so finally, by the time I published this thing, which, now I'm holding a copy in my hand right now, it's like, it's not that, exciting to be holding it now, but I remember a time it was like amazing, to have my own book. I had to go through a lot of change, and so what I would say to people who want to manifest and change things in your life, reality creation can be easy. You can learn with joy and all those things, but sometimes we have very painful issues, whether it's with being loved or deserving and stuff, and you got to face those. That's what I do in my counseling. People come to me, and they say, I want this and I want that, and I say, okay, are you willing to change? And then I either get people who say, they really don't want to change, they just want to talk about and complain and go into their story, or the other people who really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of their beliefs, because that's how we're going to change our individual reality, and our collective reality is dealing with our own inner consciousness and our pain and transmuting it and transforming it. That's what we need. Absolutely.
And another aspect to that I picked up over the years is that it's really crucial to learn how to tell yourself the truth, how to be brutally honest with yourself, and also how to hold your integrity, keep your word, and be honest with other people. I can go into a million reasons why, but that's part of a purification process that is necessary no matter where you are on a spiritual path. It has to happen.
I have a very good story. Now, I want people to realize, even though I'm an author and I do counseling, I'm still learning lessons. And about 2 weeks ago, I was shopping in a store. This is what happened. It was a supermarket. I was looking around. I parked my little shopping cart in an aisle, and for like maybe 5 seconds, I stepped across to another aisle, like a dairy case or something, to look at some other food there. Maybe I was gone 5 seconds, maybe 7. Okay, let's say 7. I turned around, and a lady was pushing my cart out of the way because my cart was blocking part of the area, and then there was another lady who was parking, and she started moving the cart. I walked up and I said, I'm sorry. I said, I can move it, no problem. And she just started shaking her head like I was like a terrible person, like I committed genocide or something. And she's like shaking her head. And then I started saying, and she kept on walking away and shaking her head like I was like I said, is it really that big of a deal? And she shot me the bird. So I was like, whoa. So at first I was upset, and I was like, whatever. And then I was like thinking about it. And I went home, and I mentioned that book, the Personal Power Through Awareness book, and they have a process called Finding Your Deepest Truth. And basically, I'm not going to go through the whole process now, but basically, when somebody does something to you, you first ask yourself as a metaphysician, are they doing something to me?
Right.
That I'm doing to myself. So I said to myself, it's funny because the scenario was that I made a simple human error.
Right.
But I was like shaming myself, and I realized that sometimes I can be very judgmental or strict with myself, and if I don't do things perfectly or in a certain way, I criticize myself. So I said, isn't it interesting? So I started writing out my emotions, and when I've criticized myself, judging, not cutting myself slack, and kind of seeing from the scenario what was going on. So I did all that, And then I did a forgiveness exercise where I said I forgive myself for not cutting myself slack, and I release myself and set myself free. So I forgive myself for all these things, and then I forgave all the people who would not cut me slack and to judge me and attack me and try to shame me like this woman did. And I felt a tremendous sense of clearing, and my reality shifted. I felt like that had been a little distinction that I caught. And so that's the kind of work that I talk about. I mean, the Magic Box is good. I feel good about it. It's a good story, and it's good orientation. But if you really want to master your reality and help the planet, being a light worker isn't just hugging people and saying, I'm sending you light. It's cleaning up your own inner world, because there are many people who often tell me that they're trying to be kind to me and loving, and I don't really feel that from them. I feel that they're just telling me that.
Exactly.
Like, you're genuine. Like, I can feel the love from you, but there's some people who, like, I go to a metaphysical church and, like, they hug you, and it's like, I don't feel loved here. I feel like it's like a show. I'm not sure what this is. It doesn't feel authentic.
Well, yes, and you're bringing up a couple things. One of the things I wanted to say about your experience with this lady, you must be a Virgo like myself, because I do the same thing. But this is a mind blower. She could easily have been somebody who had an agreement at the soul level to appear at that moment and do that just for that experience, so that you could have an expansion of awareness and growth and so on and so forth. So, it's another way to shift our perception of those people that we can't stand.
Well, actually, every day I do a gratitude exercise, and I always give thanks to all the people who help me. Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the things in the Magic Box, I don't want to really give it away, but it talks about metaphysics and magic, but also about taking action on things. That's one of the key messages about, if you take action, then magic begins to happen. It's kind of one of the messages. Many years ago, I was in a metaphysical bookstore, and I had this big pile of books. I was really into studying at that time. And so I came to the counter, and I said to the lady, if I don't become enlightened, do I get my money back? Like, I was joking with her,
Yeah.
So there was this German tourist. He was behind me, and he said, when you do what the books say, you'll be enlightened.
Whoa.
And he really pissed me off, and I was like, you missed my joke, and I walked out, and I was kind of upset. But years later, I realized it was a moment of grace where the universe was saying, Egan, it's good to study, it's good to read things, it's good to have knowledge. But acting on it, it's not just, it's not just talking about being kind, it's being kind. It's not just trying to talking about making the world a better place, it's taking action. So that guy, he changed my whole life. I can never thank him. Maybe he's listening tonight. I don't know. Wherever he is, I want to thank him. And the lady in the grocery store, again, a lot of times in metaphysics, people say, well, just focus on the positive, put out positive, only positive comes back. Well, that's going to happen, and negative things happen, but you can get positive out of negative and for your growth. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's the power of transformation, transforming our experiences and learning that for me, everything that's ever happened to me since birth has been a learning experience, and I haven't always felt that way, but I see it that way now. And so when something comes up in the present moment, and sometimes, like, I'll write a blog entry or something, and then something will happen that will just create the exact opposite, so that I have to experience what I'm written about. And I'm sure you've had a lot of synchronicity like that too. You'll be teaching or talking. Well, I'm going to tell you what it is, because I looked at your blog. You're very articulate. You write very well, and I was like, wow, this guy, he's a really good writer. And I was reading some of the things. There's something called bioenergetic shock, and I want to bring this up because it's very important. Okay. When Jesus was walking around, and I believe in Jesus, by the way, when he was walking around, he was a very loving guy, very peaceful guy. He was of a different consciousness, different vibration. He was a master. People would get around him, and they would have different reactions. Some would love him. Yeah. Some would follow him. Some would die for him. Yeah. But other people got freaked out because he was challenging them. Some were filled with hate, and when they were presented with his love, they didn't know what to do. They're like, what is his love? We don't know. He can forgive. He's loving. I don't get this. It was so different. And he was shocking them because his consciousness of love and peace was so high that when people of an unlike vibration would get around them, it would shock them. Yes. So I know as a teacher, I used to get frustrated saying, why is it when I do a class and then people will get mad at me, and I was like, what is this? And I realized that in some ways I was forcing them to look at issues that they didn't want to look at, make them conscious, and rather than take responsibility, they would project it onto me. So when you were out there, trying to present higher ideas, I mean, even with my book, The Magic Box, people have been critical. Oh, it's just a kid's book, and some people don't get it. You know, I've had rejection. It's kind of odd, but I understand. I understand that it's just bioenergetic shock because I'm trying to present a positive alternative.
Yeah.
And if they're not in an alignment, or they're judgmental, or competitive or something, they have to attack. And a lot of people on the internet, especially, they're catty. They sit around. They're not writing anything, so they figure, well, if some guy writes a blog, let me attack him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't feel bad, but you write very well.
Well, thank you. In fact, I'll send you a copy of my book. We'll exchange.
Okay.
Because I went through the whole writing process too, and I won't bore the listeners with all that right now. But I really pushed to get it out in a 9-year, which was my name works out to 9 and numerologically. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. It was all 9, so I did get it finished, and but it's like you, it's so strange. It was such a big deal at the time, and then afterwards, it's like, why was I making such a big deal out of this?
Yeah.
And it hasn't been my fate to have it be a bestseller. So,
well, mine's not a bestseller either. But my feeling is,
we did it. We did it.
But you know what's amazing though, and again, we talk about changing the world.
Yeah.
It's like I told you about these two people I talked, the lady in the grocery store and the other guy.
Yeah.
That changed me.
Yeah.
And then I affected a lot of people. And even with the hypermiling thing, I saw this guy who started doing the hypermiling, and the reason he's doing it is the less oil he uses, there's less pollution, but it's also a lot of our money goes overseas to countries that don't like us.
That's right.
I saw him on TV. I said, wow. I started doing it. I tested it out for a couple of months, found that I increased my gas mileage 50%, and now my goal is to reach 100,000 people with the email. So now I'm doing it. So I see one guy do something, and then that influences me. So if one person reads your book,
yes.
There's certain things that I've read. I mean, my book, The Magic Box, is dedicated to Joseph Murphy. And for those of you who don't know who Joseph Murphy was, he wrote a book called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. He was a lovely, lovely man. He was a Science of Mind minister. I learned a lot about Christianity from him. He kind of was a Science of Mind minister, but knew a lot about the Bible. And he's a wonderful soul. And the wizard character in my book is sort of modeled on him. But he was such a loving being, Joseph Murphy, that reading his material influenced me. And that had an impact. So never doubt. I mean, even if you're out there listening and you're not a writer or on a radio show or whatever, being kind to somebody, helping somebody become more conscious, even just being happy.
Yeah.
And somebody else saying, wow, that person's happy.
Yeah.
That can have an impact.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a famous person to make an impact. You just have to make an impact.
Absolutely right. It only takes one to change the world.
Yep.
And, I wanted to ask you about something. There's so many questions that I have, which I didn't get to, that I'll have to have you back. I hope you'll come back. But in regards to personal responsibility, I think one thing that I see around, the way that we operate as humans is that we act as if there's no repercussion or responsibility for our actions. And quite a few of my guests have had near-death experiences, and they all talk about the same thing, that they go through a life review and that they see they actually experience everything that they've done to other people, negative and positive, and the implications all the way down, how that impacts the whole planet, the universe. And so I'm just wondering if you feel that that's something that we do experience, or as souls, that there is an accountability on the soul level?
Two things. One thing is, one of the ideas from a third-dimensional perspective is that our reality, we're in a reality.
Right.
Here I'm on the phone, you're on the phone, we're thousands of miles apart.
Yeah.
We are in a reality. Another idea is that we're infinite consciousness in reality, and our physical bodies are within our consciousness.
Yeah.
So as within, so without, as above, so below. There is no separation anymore.
Right.
Life review. This is my spin on it. Every day is a life review.
Yeah.
I sit, I go in, I look at my life. What am I doing?
Yeah.
What have I put out? What do I get back? I think I'd seen one of the rules I know for the universe is that what you put out is what you get back, and that's the bottom line. So for me, what I have found is I have often been very difficult on myself on the spiritual path, thinking I had to do everything perfect.
Yeah.
But I would get angry, I would get upset, I wasn't always my best self. I've gotten better over the years and over the lifetimes.
Yeah.
So what I say to people is, examine yourself, think about the repercussions. If you do something wrong, you feel guilty about
Yeah.
it. Forgive yourself, and next time just don't do it again.
Yeah.
And that's it. And in that way, you don't have to, repay the karma. You simply have to, don't repeat it.
Yes.
You can make amend. You can do amend in some way. But I find that every day I have to examine what I'm doing. Like with the woman who was rude to me.
Yeah.
I was grateful. I could have yelled at her. I could have gotten into a whole fight with her.
Yeah.
But I said that wouldn't. I said, how can I be more loving? So my approach is I try to be very loving and forgiving with other people, but I still stick up for myself.
Yeah.
But also to learn my lessons. So I think we can approach this, clearing up of our karma and improving our consciousness in many different ways, but we have to let go of the guilt, because I used to beat myself up mercilessly if I allowed myself to have human emotions or get angry.
Yeah,
and I remember finally one time I was in a very difficult relationship, and my teacher said, well, you got to release the anger. So I went home, I beat the hell out of my bed, like whipped it with like a belt or something.
Yeah.
I had an aching back for a couple of days and realized that I had all this anger at this woman. And when I released it, then I could think clearly.
Yeah.
But if I kept on suppressing it and denying and saying, no, I don't have these emotions or positivity, that's one of the problems with the New Age, is that people suppress a lot of they pave over their negativity with a smile, and it doesn't really help. The demons come out at another time.
Exactly. And that's when you have mass murderers and horrible things going on all over the place.
Oh, yeah. You have to release those emotions.
Yeah, it's repressed emotions and denial.
Oh, yeah.
So I like that. That's a really interesting answer. I do agree with that too.
I've tried every type of spiritual process, and I just remember when I was beating that bed, that was probably one of the best ones. I was like whipping and going, and you did this and you did that, and it was funny because while I was whipping the bed and mentally yelling at this woman, she just looked like in the visualization. She said, "I don't know what I'm doing," and in that moment I realized she was unconscious.
Yes.
I could forgive her, but if I had not allowed myself to have that anger, I would never have known that. So it's not just saying affirmations and prayers. And again, I'm proud of the magic box, but there are more aspects to it, and that's mostly what I do in my workshops and my counseling. So,
well, we're almost out of time. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners before? First of all, tell us where your website is.
Sure. I have two websites. One is Egan, EGAN, Sanders.com, and I have a monthly newsletter, and also you can download a free report, 25 Ways to Clear Blockages to Well-Being, which is available for free. And then if you want to buy the book, it's through the publishing company, which is Agni, AGNE publishing.com, and there's actually a link on my EganSanders.com website where you can buy the book.
Good.
And that's it.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Egan, you have just been a wonderful... I've just had so much fun talking to you tonight. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. And I do want you to come back, so I only got to 2 questions on my list.
Well, but we got the right information, and I'll come back again. It's great to talk to you.
Okay, good, wonderful. Thank you so much, and have a good evening.
You too.
All right. Thanks to all the listeners, and good night.
Good night.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Zany Mystic, also known as Lance White. Tonight's guest is Egan Sanders. Egan is the author of a book that I highly recommend called The Magic Box. He is also an intuitive counselor, coach, spiritual development teacher, author, and event organizer. He was born with intuitive abilities and as an empath has always been able to psychically experience the thoughts, images, and feelings of other people. As a small child, he would talk in great detail about his previous life as a shaman in the American Southwest. So let's find out more about this lifetime by welcoming him to the show now. Hi, Egan. How are you?
Hi, Lance. Very good. Thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. I just read your book, and I absolutely loved it. It was just every wonderful bit of wisdom and magic was packed right into it. I really enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you. I worked on it for about 12 years on and off, and it was a strange process that I went through in writing the book. But when I got down to the final edit of it, my goal really was to write something that was short, that was inspirational, but also had practical tools for reality creation and gave some good points. So I'm very happy with it, so thank you.
Yes. In fact, to be honest with you, the ending kind of brought tears to my eyes. So
Yeah, that's the thing. I know when I was writing it when I first started writing it in 1996, basically what happened was I was on hiatus from my job, and I'd been reading a lot of motivational things, and I'd always been into metaphysics, and I kind of sat down and spontaneously just started to write the book. And I knew when I came to the end, and I don't want to give away the end of the book.
Right. Don't
it's a surprise. That's what people, they always say, wow, that ending, how did you come up with that? I just kind of made it up, but it just was very poignant. So, I think I'm very proud of that too.
I'd say that's divine inspiration. That's my label for it anyway.
Oh yeah. I always feel like I remember reading about Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Richard Bach, his little book, which is it's similar in certain ways, and he just said, that he channeled it, and that's kind of the way I felt with this. Is that yes, I can see certain ideas that I put into it, but it's just like creativity. Certain things just come out very clear. Yeah. And that came out very clear. So I think it was divinely inspired.
Well, I agree with you on that aspect of channeling. I read a lot of channeled material, and as a result, I've gotten to be a little more discerning in what I accept as, mainly accurate information. And I know that for myself, in my own writing, I end up channeling stuff frequently. I just start typing, and then all of a sudden it's like the energy shifts, and I've learned that you have to get out of the way and just let that flow. And then when it's over, it's over. You can't really force it to go on longer than it does. Maybe there's structure, but I try to keep it where I feel like it's an empowering vibration. That's why when I was working with the Magic Box, I wanted to make it sort of have archetypes in it, have an inspirational story, but then actual practical, like a how-to guide in it, so that it would empower people, but in a profound way, but not where I'm claiming to give every little answer to everything. Yes, I like the way that you did that, and that's kind of what drew me into it. And I hope I'm not giving too much away by saying that there is a wizard in it. Yeah, there's basically. And I love wizards. It's like a wizard. It's like a teacher. I mean, he's the prototypical teacher. Yeah. And then there's like a student who grows up and over time develops. So basically, it's about the spiritual path. And the brief idea of the Magic Box is that this boy goes to a wizard when he's a very little boy and says, he wants to manifest things. And so the wizard has a magic box, and whenever you put a wish in the box, it comes true. So as the boy gets older, he keeps on going back and asking for more things, which, as human beings, we tend to ask for more and more things. So by the end, though, after getting health and wealth and love and all these things, he asks for wisdom or enlightenment. So to me, that's really the key thing, is you can have stuff, but you also need to have wisdom and enlightenment. Yes, absolutely. And that seems to be something that this culture, and in fact most of the planet, seems to be dearly lacking in, due to the obsession with materialism and the acquisition of stuff. Well, I think we're going through a questioning period about that. It's kind of like paradoxical. On the one hand, we focus on lack all the time, with the economy and all the things that are going on, and people are suffering around the world. It's not a made-up thing. Right. I was talking to a metaphysical teacher the other day, and they're like, well, my economy is fine, and I'm okay. And I'm like, well, I understand that, and I'm happy that you're doing well, but, that doesn't, it was a little bit elitist, that I felt like saying, what about the balance? You can still be doing well, but have compassion for other people. Exactly. Right. So I think we're learning lessons. I mean, to me, I was thinking about this today. I was just before our interview, I was watching a documentary about John Lennon, and he did this thing back in 1970 where it was like a love-in for peace, and for like a whole year he was doing these events and on TV promoting peace. And I thought and basically, so there was lots of war, and he was saying peace. Let's have peace. So I was thinking, with the thing with the bailout and the economy. I think the real message that I would like to share with other people, whether it's with my books or even what I'm doing, my classes, is that there is abundance. There is plenty. I mean, there is plenty of energy. We can help each other, but we have to examine how we distribute those things. We have to examine, for me, real simple fix is that if you have money, help another person. Right. I mean, it's very simple. Right. Right, and it seems that there has to be some kind of line drawn. Yeah, I mean, when you're writing or doing anything, I think that there's certain things ring true.
And when I was writing the Magic Box, I tried to just keep the stuff that I felt like really felt strong, like I felt strong. But I know in the channel material, I've been reading channel material for many, many years, all of it's good. There are many different levels of awareness. I think there's many, good ways for channel material, but sometimes I'll read it and, I'll say, well, it just feels like a rehash of what somebody's saying, or, or if some higher being is, calling me their child. That doesn't, dear child, it doesn't feel very empowering. So
thank you.
You're
the first person who has said that, and I couldn't agree with you more. As soon as I see all of this, talking down, I just feel like, what we're talking to is somebody's ego.
Well, it's a hierarchical structure. To me, I've gone through an interesting process because I've been teaching since 1995, and I was a student, before then for many, many years. And when I finally got to the point of beginning to teach, it was a sharing, it was a learning, and there were many more lessons for me to learn as well. And so what I find when I'm teaching something, I call it more sharing. Like I come in, I present the ideas. I don't present it as the gospel, but I say, well, this has been my experience, and then I learn from that. But there's a total equality. I believe in validating other people's realities. So to me, I don't want to invalidate something. Like even though if a channel calls me their child or something, I mean that